Hello, this is D, and I'm back with another video, and today we're going to take a look at how Sony ran Sega out of the console business. We're also going to take a look at the US Congress investigating Sony as well as Europe for anti-competitive practices. Now, this is coming from the Sega leak, and I'm getting this from Kirby Louise. You guys can follow him on Twitter. Now, he goes on to say in the post, well, the post says, Sega of America, Saturn versus the PlayStation. How did Sony do it? Now, before I get into all of that, as we all know, Sony is the market leader, and they are a ruthless company when it comes to competition. They always try to snuff out the competition by any means necessary, which is why lots of us are scratching our head at the FTC going after Microsoft when Sony is the biggest offender. Now let's get into this post. Now, Sony is generally perceived to be cheaper. This has improved, but we still suffer from early damage. Now, this is Sega's internal documents. They're talking about the Sony PlayStation. Sony's product software looks better than ours. This is driven by our lack of delivering a product that appears to consumers to be better and advertising that focuses on this dimension. PlayStations are better merchandised than Saturn, resulting in more exposure and sampling. Sega equity has been damaged by 32x Sega CD. Since PlayStation is newer, some consumers feel like it's technically superior. Sony has effectively leveraged their considerable equity from consumers' electronics. So back when the Sega Saturn was out, Sony had like Walkmans, Ghetto Blasters, CD players at the time. They had TVs, radios. They really were an electronic juggernaut. Now, Sony still is pretty good in the electronics, but I don't think there's such a driving factor in that field anymore. Their TVs still do well, and of course, they make lots of chips and lots of sensors for devices. But overall, they're not as big in the electronic industry as they once were. Back then, they were top of the food chain in everything, and they used that to their advantage, and that helped drive the Sega Saturn and Sega in general out of the business. They never recovered from that. They never made any more consoles. Now, I don't want to say that Sony was the sole reason why Sega went out of business. As they also alluded to, the 32 times Sega CD, it was not well received. I briefly remember it at the time. It was more powerful than the PlayStation, but it was the marketing, and I just think people weren't really into it, and it just failed ultimately. Of course, Sony used its platform. It used its considerable equity from consumers' electronics to leverage a win and drive Sega out of business. So Sony is used to driving the competition out, which is why I don't understand why the FTC is defending Sony's interests. They are the market leader. I've said this over and over again. Most of you watching my coverage on the hearings know how I feel about Sony, and if you've been looking at all of the evidence, you know that they are not playing by the rules. Now, as I alluded to earlier, Sony is being investigated over concerns it's abusing its dominant position in the video game console market. Now, this is coming from GamesRadar.com like usual. I'll leave a link in the description down below so you guys can check it out for yourself. Now, the article goes on to say that Sony is being investigated by Romania's competition watchdogs over concerns it's abusing PlayStation's dominant position in the console market by having digital games available through the PlayStation Store only and banning third parties from selling activation codes. In a press release translated and shared by Reset Era, the Romanian Competition Council said the competition authority has indications that Sony may have abused its dominant position in the video game console market, both by selling online video games compatible with PlayStation consoles exclusively through the PlayStation Store platform, by prohibiting the sale of game activation codes video compatible with the PlayStation consoles by competing distributors. The competition body says these actions would have reduced purchasing options for PlayStation games, resulting in higher prices for titles on Sony's console. On top of that, it adds that this could also discourage Romanian studios from developing video games compatible with the PlayStation. And I believe at some part their offices got raided and they took a lot of documents. So this is a serious investigation going on over in Europe. And I don't see a lot of media outlets covering this. We have the FTC trial going on. We see all these articles about Microsoft, and we see some of these alternate reality articles saying that Microsoft is bad and this deal is going to be bad for consumers. But not a peep about this investigation over in Romania. And this was the 30th of May. This was well before this hearing, and we didn't hear much about this. You really have to dig about that information. That's why I thought today I should bring it out in this video so you guys can get the whole entire picture of what Sony's operation is. and they are ruthless. And they don't care about the consumer like you think they do. They care about the consumer's dollars and all those dollars going into Sony's pockets. And these are the facts, and they have a history of doing all this stuff. Also, a few months ago, I did a video that Congress was investigating Sony on these anti-competitive practices by not allowing developers to work with Xbox. There's an actual video on this of the Congress speaking on this, and I'll get to that in a second. Let's read this article, and this is coming from insidergaming.com, and once again, I'll leave it in the comment section down below. Now, it says 11 members of the US Congress are asking the Biden administration to investigate Sony. The reason, they claim Sony is hurting Microsoft's Xbox performance in Japan. Two political parties in the US claim that Sony business practices harm Microsoft and other US companies from succeeding in Japan. They claim that the way Sony operates could be against US-Japan agreements. Now, why does the US Congress want Sony investigated? Today, we bring to your attention the imbalanced Japanese video game market, which we are concerned may result in discriminatory trade practices that could violate the spirit of the US-Japan Digital Trade Agreement. The Japanese government's effective policy on non-prosecution when it comes to Sony. They go on to say that today we write to bring to your attention the imbalanced Japanese video game market, which we are concerned may be a result of discriminatory trade practice that could violate the spirit of the US-Japan Digital Trade Agreement. They go on to say that the Japanese government effective policy of non-prosecution when it comes to Sony appears to be a serious barrier to US exports, with real impacts for Microsoft and many US game developers and publishers that sell globally but see their earnings in Japan depressed by these practices. The letter from Congress on the matter requests the matter be addressed with Japanese government officials. There's been no response from Japanese officials on the matter. However, the US Trade Representative Catherine Tay did say the concerns will be looked into. Now, I'm going to show you that video, and you're going to see that this is a real thing, because some people think we make these things up. This is the US Congress speaking on the matter.
Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, as you know, I'm a strong proponent of opening up markets for U.S. company from agriculture to high tech. I'd be interested in hearing more about how on this negotiating platform can be used to address trade barriers. One specific thing, even though we're a close partner with Japan and have great trade relationships, there's one sector where I feel like we are facing types of non-tariff trade barriers. For example, I'm told that Sony controls a monopoly of 98% of the high-end game market, yet Japan's government has allowed Sony to engage in blatant anti-competitive conduct through exclusive deals and payments to game publishers, establishing games that are among the most popular in Japan not to distribute the games on other platforms. And so Japan's Federal Trade Commission has failed to investigate these exclusionary conducts. So what do you think we can do to more address these issues and create a level playing field with the IPEF on something as important as this issue?
Senator Cantwell, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework provides us with a lot of opportunities, and I think you're absolutely right that the economies that we are engaging with right now are all focused on expanding participation in their economies and looking at trade policies that also promote and support competition. So we have that particular outlook. We also have an ongoing digital negotiation as well. What you've described is something that I expect may very well come up in the intersection of those two perspectives, being pro-competition and also engaging on the digital economy. That is absolutely an area that we are primed to address. This one is new for me, but let me take this back, and I'm happy to follow up with you and your team on this.
If they were blocking access, that would be of great concern. Yes.
If they were, or are they?
Well, I'm saying they are, but if you said you were looking into it, I just want to make clear you view this as a problem.
Yes, I think monopolistic behavior is something that is a drag on economic growth and development.
Thank you.
So there you have it. I don't know what to say. The evidence speaks for itself. Sony, they're not a good company. They don't have good customer relationships. They're in it for themselves. They don't care about consumers. They don't care about the market. They care about their bottom line, which is making money. And they don't care how they do it, but they will try their best to run the competition out the market. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. To be successful, you kind of have to be cutthroat. So I get that. My point is, why is the FTC protecting Sony's interests? They are the market leader. We see their track record on how they push companies out, how they helped with the demise of Sega and with them being in the console market, how money had a lot of exclusives. Even back in the day, they were money having exclusives. I believe Tomb Raider came out exclusively on the PlayStation, and that was pretty much the nail in the coffin for the Sega Saturn. We see them doing it this entire generation and the previous generation. Right now, they don't have their own first-party exclusives, so they're paying for third-party exclusives, such as Final Fantasy. Yet the FTC is turning a blind eye to all of these actions and going directly after Microsoft, which is ridiculous. Now we're about a day out. This is Tuesday. We're expecting a result as early as tomorrow, which is Wednesday, on the hearing of the FTC versus Microsoft. We are expecting it to go in Microsoft's favor because the evidence just doesn't support the FTC's claims. And when that decision comes down in Microsoft's favor, we're going to have to take a long look at Sony. And I think Sony really left themselves exposed here with all of their business practices. And I think it's going to be harder for them to get certain deals done in the future. I think they've turned off a lot of gamers as well. I'm not saying that the entire Sony base is upset about this because, the fanboys, how they react. They don't care. Sony can never do no wrong. But there are some people that don't like this type of behavior, and they don't like the way the company is going about their business. I do play the PlayStation. I like the games that are on that system. I like the exclusives that they have. But as a company, I'm not a big fan of them. I don't like the way they run their business. I don't like how they're not for competition, how they try to snuff out the competition in any way possible, going as far as to enlisting the help of the FTC. And the FTC didn't do its due diligence, didn't do its research, because if it did, you would see that Sony is not to be protected. Anyways, I want to know what you guys think about all of this. What do you think about Sony running Sega out of the console market? What do you think about Congress investigating Sony and its anti-competitive practices? What do you think about the Romanian government also going after Sony? Let me know in the comment section down below. And like I usually say, please like, share, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys on the next one.